We're going to be talking about what is vendor and contract lifecycle management, known as VCLM, and how you could use it to better manage your vendors, your contracts, and your risks. VCLM is an integrated approach to vendor lifecycle management, contract lifecycle management, and third-party risk management. Too often, these are dealt with in silos across so many different teams. You've got finance, you've got legal, contract management, procurement, vendor management, infosec, risk and compliance. The list just goes on and on. And because of this, the vendor and contract and risk management process around this is often chaotic, without clear leadership, clear ways of working, with different teams within your organization working with vendors and their contracts in their own way. It's just a recipe for a disaster, right? Like, this is never going to work. It's not a scalable way of working. And what you'll find is that within these silos, in between them, this is where these risks tend to emerge. They come out of the blue, right? They seep into everything you're doing. And then they start to slowly destroy everything you've kind of been working to protect. And you're not aware of it because maybe this was on finance's table and procurement couldn't see it. But with a VCLM approach, all of this, anything related to your vendors and their contracts, is visible to the entire organization. Let's take vendor lifecycle management to start with. Arguably, this is one of the most fundamental processes that will happen in your organization. Yet, it's often dealt with in a very manual, chaotic, spreadsheet-driven way with some emails chucked in. Spreadsheets used to track all your work and then used as standalone databases alongside email, they're just never going to work for you as you scale. They're inefficient for managing your vendors and your contracts with them, and it often means that you're always on the back foot. Everything you do is reactive. You're always doing something after the event. You're always putting in data into a spreadsheet or an email after something's happened. And when we're thinking about building up better resiliency within our vendor base, when we're trying to get better performance out of all of our vendors, when we're trying to save costs on our contracts, that's not a position you want to be in. But with VCLM, you can bring all of that data into a centralized area. And this, in turn, restores visibility to your entire organization about every vendor you have. And then we move on past that visibility point, right? Because once we have all of the data and we know all of our vendors, one thing we really need to nail down is that consistency and approach to how we manage our vendors. How do we operate with them? What are our processes to working with them? And with a VCLM approach, it means that you pull all of these different teams together that have typically dealt with vendors. You pull them all together into the same process that you can roll out across your entire organization, your subsidiary companies, or even different locations around the world. So you know that every time a vendor is being onboarded or offboarded, or you're doing a performance review with them, that everything is being done in the same way. All that data is comparable because you're doing everything in a similar manner and you have trust in your own internal processes. Everything you're doing, you know, is just the right thing that you should be doing. So let's move on to contract lifecycle management now. And this is actually an area that before Gatekeeper, I spent, a few years heading up a lot of contract management teams, and I've gone from working in a very manual way to a very automated and tech-driven way. And typically, the inefficiencies that I've always seen with contract management, when contract management is dealt with in isolation of, say, a procurement team, or is dealt with solely by legal, and legal don't really care what procurement want or need, it ends in disaster. Contracts take forever to get reviewed. There is no clear way of requesting a contract review. It's difficult to know what contracts you already have in place with which vendors. Like the data, the correlation, the connections, they're just not there. And let's face it, if none of that's there, there's absolutely zero chance that you are going to be able to manage these contracts at all. However, VCLM does things differently. It automates and centralizes all of your contract information, your data, and your processes, much like the VLM processes and ways of working that I've just gone over. This is all of your activities such as contract intake or request management, contract reviews, negotiations, sending out your own contract terms to your vendors, digital signatures, storing all of this information, and then all of your post-signature contract management activities. All of this contract information isn't in isolation, right? Because for every vendor that you have, each vendor has a linked contract record. And it kind of works vice versa, right? Any contract you have has a linked vendor record. So whatever data you gather on a vendor or a contract, it's always connected to the relevant vendor or the contract, which means you always know exactly what's going on. I've seen so many contract databases that just have a one-liner as to which vendor or what counterparty it's with. And you click on it and it's just empty. There's no information there. And you really don't understand your vendors. So how can you really drive better collaboration, better performance management, getting more value out of those contracts? I spoke about this in a previous video on what is contract management, about protecting contract erosion and minimizing that as much as possible. You can't do that without using a VCLM approach. And lastly, let's talk about third-party risk management. This is the piece that has been missing, especially from a procurement team's perspective, for so long. CPOs' agendas are certainly changing, CFOs also. What we need is more resiliency. We need better and stronger and more robust supply chains. We need vendors to deliver what they say they're going to deliver on time and in the right manner. This is procurement 101, right? This is everything that procurement professionals are taught as soon as they get in the role. Yet, over the last few years, this has been majorly disrupted. Just-in-time supply chains and things like this have really disrupted the way in which procurement can do its role. And now risks are everywhere. And we spoke earlier on in this video about, how do we move from a reactive way of working to a proactive way of working? If I'm only being able to document risks as they happen, as they emerge, I'm never going to be able to protect my organization from my vendors or my contractual risks. So VCLM is all about bringing in that TPRM process and embedding it throughout the vendor lifecycle and the contract lifecycle. It means that whenever you're dealing with a vendor, all of the key actions and key tasks you need to do, whether it's vendor onboarding, contract reviews, risk reviews, cyber checks, credit checks, all of that is well thought out and considered at the outset. It's not a surprise that actually I might need to go and do these risk reviews or do these kinds of due diligences. This is all thought about at the outset of your relationship with the vendor. Risk management really is a weak area for a lot of teams that manage vendors. And typically it comes down to a data point. We don't have the right data at hand. We can go through all of these spreadsheets, SharePoint, emails, but we're never going to get it. And with VCLM, especially a digital VCLM approach, and when I say VCLM, let's be clear, and we're talking about digital here, there is no way VCLM can be done unless it is digital. You have all of that data to hand, whether it's data that you've collected throughout the onboarding or contract review process or your due diligence, or whether it's through data feeds for credit checks, cyber checks that monitor the health, both the financial and the cyber health of your vendors all the time, even whilst you're not working, right? It's amazing. So to me, VCLM is a game changer in that space by combining these three areas that are so vital, that are often so neglected by organizations that just focus so much on elements such as sourcing or purchase orders. You kind of forget about these key areas, which, especially if you're in a regulated industry, man, these protect you so much. So VCLM really is a game changer in that sense. It's just going to bring a lot of assurance to your organization. It's going to combine all of those teams to work really nicely together. CFO, procurement, legal, working in sync is something that I imagine many of you want more than anything within your organization. So thank you so much for checking this video out today. I actually want to point you now to another video that we've done. It's all about what is contract management. We go a little bit more in depth than what I've done today in this video, and we show off a little bit of the VCLM platform at Gatekeeper. So check that out now.